Out of all forms and types of dragons, there are perhaps none that are as beloved and sought out as much as the silvers. And this is very easy to understand, once you know even the most basic facts about them, as they are the closest thing in this world that we have to a purely good dragon. They are quite friendly by nature, almost to the point where they can be overbearing at times, but they are sincere in their care and love for others, and they have a special care for the likes of humanoids. But amongst all humanoids, there's a race of them that they love the most, and that is specifically humans. They adore humans for a myriad of reasons, and in many ways they actually admire them. See, dragons are quite long-lived, and silvers are no different. This long life usually allows complacency, the idea that if something is worth doing, you can put it off for later. But humans can't think this way, we just can't afford it. We live far too short lives, and silver dragons love that we have this drive naturally within us to get work done, and their worldview is more like ours in that regard. This is one of the main reasons that silver dragons just love spending time with humans, and they often polymorph themselves to live among them. For quite some time, I might add, almost entire lifetimes, they will spend living amongst humans, maybe even living out a life in a bizarre form of roleplay, where they pretend to be a human. A lot of them live the life of adventurers, and some even do it for the entirety of a human's lifetime. During these sorts of encounters, they might make many close friendships with humans due to their loving and caring nature, but as a dragon, they might be called away for more important matters, only to return to see their old friend once again, to learn that they're actually long dead, and their grandson now works in their place, for the dragon lost track of time, and he'd actually died of old age. Many encounters like this sadly happen quite common, and almost always leave the silver dragon heartbroken. Still, some try to keep in touch with whole dynasties because of this, that instead of having friends with just one member, they try to befriend the whole family. Many will sadly wander off in a deep depression at the loss of their friend, though, as they missed the twilight days of their life, and usually regret it. They try to stay in contact, but the way they perceive the world is just different from us. And so in a blink of their eye, we will fade. Still though, they are like most metallics in many regards, but unlike most metallics, when the debate of law and what is right comes up, they will almost always side with what they feel is the right thing to do. The good part of them. In fact, they would probably break a law if their friend was in need. They might even go so far as to do this unprompted if the friend has been unjustly put up against the law. They are still very much lawful creatures, don't get me wrong, but if the debate where morality was put over law, they would drop the law. Of course, following the law is still very important to them, don't get the wrong impression. Compared to other metallics, they are more likely to fall out of line though. This is the main thing that actually gets them into arguments and conflicts with other metallics, and for this reason, they're more of the outliers than any other type. Regardless, their main personality trait can pretty much be summed up by how friendly they are, and in a few ways quite childish. They almost come across as silly, and perhaps condescending at times, but I assure you they actually are quite sincere, despite how they may come across as a bit childish. Another thing they do that's actually quite fascinating, and it's related to their polymorphing. Like a lot of metallics, they disguise themselves as humanoids in order to test the virtue of those they come across, or just to travel around the town and look at the normal people's lives, to get the feeling of their true nature. However, unlike most metallics, they mostly do it because they just enjoy it. Living life as a human for a bit is a fun activity for them. They also just love spending time with humanoids, and unlike other metallics, they are actually likely to reward those of good character instead of just punishing those of bad. In fact, they might even reward you if they just like you or think you are interesting. As I said before, they have a very special fondness for humans. In fact, they have such a special fondness for humans that they actually changed their dietary needs. dragons don't really have much of requirements when it comes to their food, but silvers liked human food so much that they now insist on having the variety that humans do. Well, true, they don't exactly go out and have normal full-course meals like humans would or have prepared food, but they will never eat the same thing every day. It would just bore them. One day they might go out and slay a mighty beast and have its meat. One day they might go to a pristine tree at the top of a valley to eat its fruit. Regardless, they will have a different meal every day and savor the delicacies of these meals. And all of this can be attributed to the time they spend with humanoids. And of course, I should now get to their hoards, which they keep like most dragons. And they don't really stand out in this regard, as they very much love coins and gems, their favourite being silver and any blue gem, no really technicalities on that front. But they do have another love when it comes to their treasures. Have you ever heard the very cheesy expression that the real treasures were the friends we made along the way? Well, to them, this expression is very much true, and in some ways not even an exaggeration. Of course, they're not actually going to keep their friends and stick them in cages and add them to their hoard. That would be cruel and nothing in the dragon's interest. But they would keep a lot of items related to that dragon's friends, wherever it might be. Almost akin to a schoolgirl with plenty of knickknacks, or some strange trinket-hoarding old lady. For example, if the dragon went out and spent a day out with their friends travelling through a festival, and the dragon absolutely loved that day, they would want to keep something that they got that day to remember it, and by extension, the friend. They would almost always keep something if it was a gift for them too. This might be something that is entirely unintended by the friend to be given, or maybe even just some junk that they acquired that day. Say a friend of a silver dragon brought them along to a holiday where eating fish is just part of the celebrations, and they gave them some fish with a wooden fork to eat it. The dragon, upon loving the food, would keep the wooden fork and add it to their treasure as if it was a priceless gem, probably unbeknownst to the friend. Another thing they love to covet is history and art. See, they love remembering the history of the lesser people around them. And in a way, they feel like they owe it to the world to remember its history. These humanoids' lives aren't that long, and so the dragon thinks it owes the world to preserve it and protect it. This can be all sorts of things, like ancient tomes and books, but it tends to be the more artistful ones and the ones with stories, like suits of armour worn by kings, or the weapons of long-dead heroes. Their love of humanoid history even extends into where they lair. See, they love to claim cold mountain-top ranges, and when they do, they love finding old castles and abandoned wizard towers to make as a base to extend onwards. Sure, they could take a natural cave system, or something that they can make with their own magic, but I'll get to that later. But they almost always want something with a historical base to back it, such as the site of a battle, or a landmark, or a large statue. Something that has history behind it. This puts them in conflict with two dragons for domain, these being the reds and the whites. But they are more than a match for most whites and can make them leave as quick as possible. But they actually also tend to beat most reds, which would be quite surprising. But to put it bluntly, they mostly do this because, well, in essence they cheat. See, most silvers don't actively seek conflict, and prefer to end issues like this peacefully. But sometimes violence is just unavoidable, so in that case, they will almost always seek allies. And if a group of adventurers can take on a red dragon on their own, well, why not seek them out and help them in a return for a fair portion of the Red's hoard? It seems perfectly fair to me, and a likely win for them. Well, I say that, but I should mention they have a very strange exception to this violent rule. Not all of them have this, but sometimes when a silver dragon sees a chromatic, they just enter a blind rage and fight them indiscriminately and brutally. Then, once the chromatic dragon is dead, they might just act as if nothing happened, and behave like this was something normal, while being covered in its blood and guts. This is one of the ways you can actually come into conflict with them, and so for this reason, I must give you advice on fighting them. The first to note is, like most metallics, they have 2 breath weapons. They have a cold one, but unlike most where it's a cloud, theirs is a short, quick blast of cold energy, almost akin to an explosion. And their second, and the one to be fearful of, is their paralyzing breath, a gas that causes most to lose control of their own body and collapse, giving the dragon ample time to crush you. And another thing that you would absolutely need to keep note of is that you will need to be ready to stop them should they wish to fly away. See, they will try to flee if the fight is not going their way, understandably so make sure that you can try and stop them from doing so. Maybe a spell to hold them in place, or perhaps a way to put up a physical barrier. Regardless, it's something you've got to keep in your back pocket. But it is quite rare that you would come to conflict with a silver dragon if you are a good person. And in truth, those who need this advice are those of a more evil nature. But sometimes you need to pick an evil to stop a greater evil. Or sometimes you need to ally out of desperation, more so than convenience. So never underestimate or dismiss the motion of helping or working with evil. In this world, things like this just can't be helped. With all of that in mind, I have to say that having silver dragons as allies is very much a good idea, and they are the most common type of dragon to align themselves and travel with the likes of adventurers. Well, some dragons take minions, most dragons take the like of minions, but silvers take genuine friendships and allies. Of course, they don't just keep the likes of adventuring parties. Perhaps they take on entire noble families, or small dynasties of hard workers and warriors. Another interesting note is that these silver dragons actually trust their allies enough to leave their hordes with them if they're on an emergency and can't be alone for a long time, and to even let them into their lair should they need to. I'd like to move on now to how they affect the domain and land around their lairs, such as having complete and utter control over the weather of their domain, as if they were casting a magical spell on it every morning. And the best part is that they don't even need to be outside. Hell, they don't even need to be in their domain for this effect to take place. Another helpful effect is that if you have a non-evil creature fall a great height within their domain, the wind and gust will shoot upwards, slowing their fall drastically and causing them to take absolutely no damage from said fall. But it might have a similar opposite effect on a creature the dragon does not like, such as the floor turning to ice under their very feet, causing them to slip and fall. This happens so erratically that even if you know it's coming, you can't prepare for it. Lastly, and in my opinion the most interesting effect they have, is their ability to make the clouds solid objects and shapes, maybe even turning them into buildings and shaping them like castles, as they see fit. It is rare that they actually lair within the clouds, as they mostly like structures with history as I stated, but if it is nearby to a historical land, they might use it, and of course those with little care in this regard will probably use them as a lair as well. So it's not unheard of to have a silver's lair be within a cloud top. But there is one last thing about their domains that are quite interesting, and that is the fact that they actually share them in their later life with their partner. See, silver dragons are one of the few types of dragons that live within a society and have a societal structure, and silver dragons live within clans. These clans are almost always related to each other in one way or another, and are ruled over by a matriarch or a patriarch. But the region each clan holds can be very varied, and can be absolutely massive. Some hold entire countries for just one clan, where they're the only members of silver dragon species that live within it. Each clan has their own culture and society, and are different from one another, but seeking a mate from within your own clan is highly taboo. Not just mostly because they're related to each other in one way or another, but also just a cultural thing. So they will seek out a mate from another clan, and try to have a formal courtship with them. When the couple is made and wish to be official, they will seek permission from both of their clan leaders, which is almost always given, as it's mostly a ceremonial thing to do this. But the next part, and the more important one, is the two of them will then invite their clans over and have an actual wedding to make it official, have them be married. Then, one of them will join the other clan and leave the other behind, and will actually move into their lair. So keep this in mind if you're actually the type to hunt dragons and you're seeking to hunt a silver. If they are older, they are more likely to be married, in which case you will actually be fighting two of them with a combined horde. So twice the fight, but for twice the reward. Of course, if you're the type to be a hunter of dragons. But for most of us, this is actually quite unusual by dragon standards for obvious reasons. Most don't tend to marry, and some have mock ceremonies that are similar to marriage, but don't use the word marriage. And another thing is that they tend to be quite older than most dragons before actually seeking a mate. They spend a lot of their younger days, and maybe even some of their adult days, just exploring the world and having fun. I have a few personal experiences with silver dragons, and there's a few I'd like to tell, but I think the one that would make the more interesting story is the only one I have that's less of a happy story, and is more of an unfortunate tale where I commit one of my greatest sins. Long time ago, I had to kill a silver dragon. This event wasn't my own doing or wanting. See, I owed a great debt to the green dragon Kazkara. For some reason or another, she wanted an egg of a silver dragon. I travelled deep into the snowy north where it led. Luckily, I had Zamuk with me, and made the time much less of a nightmare, I assure you. But after we arrived at the foot of the silver dragon's castle, we saw its lair just within sight. It was a long abandoned castle made by a king to be a personal palace, with much full and royal details, that had been abandoned long ago. He flew down before us, landing just a bit away. I tried to speak to him, but upon his sight of Zamuk, he flew into a rage and attacked us on the spot, accusing us of something, but I couldn't quite make it out at the time. The fight was tough, and unfortunately, he gave me little choice but to slay him then and there. Afterwards, I travelled into his lair, getting hit by a few of his traps, I might add. But I made it to his hoard, only to see his dead wife covering a clutch of eggs. I know not what killed her, or perhaps maybe that was the real reason he was thrown into a rage, and he might have been accusing us of doing it. But there was the eggs I sought, and the hoard for the dragon was mine for the taking. But even to this day, I'm saddened by this finding. There was most likely nothing I could have done, and the death of the mate was not mine. Perhaps it turned him feral. But the saddest part, and the part that haunts me the most, is I never learned their names. I know what I did is in the past, but the pain is still with me. I think that's enough stories for now. I should stop going on. Maybe we should talk about something else. Thank you for listening to my tales. I am the Ashborn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But until next we meet, fellow traveller, do have a good night now.